you do it, mate.
I hate you so much. All right, let's do this.
Okay, wait, fine. Okay, well, we already started, so anyhow, welcome back to another episode of Oceans Apart podcast. And once again, we have our beloved Declan Morrissey, two R's, one S. No, two S's, my bad. Um, yeah, as we're gonna keep doing on this procedure, we have another amazing guest today. We have Eric Hogan joining the podcast,
That's
and
Eric with a K.
yes, that's
Yes,
very
it is.
important.
It's with a K.
Eric, okay. And then what topic of the day is weight cuts, weight loss. So I think we're just gonna dive in. Who wants to start off?
Alrighty.
Eric is going to start us off because he's
Okay.
basically Mike fucking Israel.
All right, let's do it.
All right. First of all, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. So first of all,
Yeah, we can hear you.
thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being on.
All right. Just want to get that. So I sent a question to you guys a little bit ago, probably about a month at this point, give or take.
Yeah, it might have been longer. I don't know. Time is meaningless to me right now.
And I asked you guys about weight cuts in sports, and I think we had a miscommunication. Me and Declan actually talked about this in class and over text a few times. Or I guess maybe my question was a little misinterpreted. What you guys were talking about was crash dieting, and I was talking about weight cutting. And I have a definition of to make a distinct weight loss, and it's very rapid weight loss in a short period, and it's not a loss of tissue. And then crash dieting is calorie restriction to induce rapid weight loss. It's not transient, and it's usually very large calorie deficits in order to achieve actual tissue loss. Do you agree with that?
Dude, I agree 100%.
Okay. All right, so we're good with that.
You can't
Just
dispute
for
definitions here.
All right. Well, that was actually a personal definition, so I'm glad we're good with that. All the references I'm going to use today are going to be through Dr. Mike Israel, as you can see with my profile picture there. The Renaissance Periodization Diet 2.0 ebook, a article from the International Journal of Sports Physiology called Acute Weight Loss Strategies for Combat Sports and Applications to Olympic Success.
Fire
and
article.
Then it was fire article. And then some anecdotal ones from actual lifters. So JP Cauchi, who's an Australian
Sure.
and Sean Ortega, who is a okay. So I'll say my first little thing here, then you can kind of say what you want after that. So basically, the first question I usually think of when we're talking about this is, why do athletes cut weight in general? Like in weight class sports, why would an athlete want to cut weight? And basically what I optimized was to max in the lowest weight class possible, and aka to compete bigger. The main thing is competitiveness. Typically speaking, this is
Why is the Wi-Fi so shit?
Yo, Eric, are you
Dude,
there?
it's not being Wi-Fi, yo.
You just cut out for your whole last point.
I did. What
Yeah.
part cut out?
Like you literally just said like compete bigger and then just it cut.
All right. Okay. So I got compete bigger. That was the last
Yeah.
part you heard.
Yeah.
All right. I said the biggest point would be competitiveness.
Okay.
Yeah.
right.
So like stereotypically speaking, and it's not always the case, you will be more competitive at a lower weight class. Stereotypically speaking, not always. There's obviously huge exceptions to that. And then I said one of the biggest things is stupidity. Some people think it's necessary. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Right.
Because
So what are your thoughts on that?
like this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I wrestled for like 10 years of my life or something stupid like that. And like I've seen some dumb
Okay.
shit happen. And like a kid in high school, just like he one of them like passed out basically from cutting too much weight too fast. And another one was like so fatigued that he couldn't defend a takedown and kind of just like stuck his arm out in like a poor decision and like separated his shoulder. And like both definitely could have won the state titles had they not totally screwed themselves with a bad weight cut.
Yep.
And and then so I think stupidity, like, yeah, because people just do it poorly, I think is a huge thing in weight cutting. And then I think people are way more familiar with like the UFC, who I think at least like once every other event they have, there's just like Johnny Hendricks is always just like, oh, I'm withdrawing because my kidneys are failing, and then someone else does the same thing, and like just because they think, and some people just think it's so necessary to do that when it's like really not. And I was thinking about that the other day after we had exchanged some messages, and my thought was like, kind of like the how we've talked about a little bit in the past, like differences in training, like heavier versus lighter lifters. I think you could apply the same logic for heavier versus lighter combat athletes, because heavier combat athletes generally don't want to cut weight as much because they're like just big. And so really at that point, like you could just push how, like you could really just get them to be as lean as like healthily possible and as like acceptable for the sport, and then just really push their capacity and like strength, power, like whatever you want to, like physical attributes you want to push with them, like you can. And then with lighter athletes, it's like trying to get them to retain all those attributes as they're cutting weight, because they're more likely to cut weight.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I also think the percentages change when it comes to a heavier athlete versus a lighter athlete, because 3% of someone who weighs 66 kilograms, absolute weight-wise, is a lot less than someone 3% if you weigh, I don't know, 120 kilograms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's also like the differences in like technique from like a light to heavy perspective in combat sport. Like if you watch like Greco-Roman wrestling is a terrible example because it's all leverages, but if you were to watch like a heavyweight wrestling match, like I think it's I don't remember if I think it's 120 is the freestyle like Olympic wrestler weight limit for the heaviest, and they like it's all body leverages. Like they're not very fast, like they're strong, but it's all like you got their leverages. And then like UFC, like they're just trying to put as much weight behind their punches as they can. And then like really it's not the opposite in a lower weight class, but it's like much less of a leverage sport, and it's much more of like a how fast you can be, like how conditioned you can be, and like how well you can perform with like different techniques, as opposed to just like trying to out leverage the other dude or woman.
Okay. I would definitely agree with that. And I think you would know better than I would because you wrestled. I never wrestled. My only strength sports are my only application to this. Mm-hmm. So I would say right off the bat that I'm limited in that aspect, although I do know some of the principles in combat sports. But what I will say is I do have a couple of examples of the weigh-in time frame, because I think the biggest thing that comes down to, there's two things that come down to this. It's the time frame you have for your weigh-in and the replenishment and rehydration process. So if you want, I can get into that.
Yeah, go for it, because that was my favorite thing from that article. For sure, It was like just bringing up the fact that sometimes the weigh-in is standard, sometimes the weigh-in is not standard, and there are variabilities between like what is and is not. occurring.
Right. Um, okay, so ones that typically you'll see in amateur wrestling, Greco-Roman, and like Olympic wrestling and stuff like that. It's going to be, I think they call it a mat side weigh-in, or just a typical 1 hour weigh-in. And 1% of body weight through minute. Even if you come in 1% dehydrated, performance won't slip. And if it does slip, it's not nearly enough to affect placing or beating someone or whatnot. When you go into 2 hour weigh-ins, which is usually there might be some jiu-jitsu events that do 2 hour weigh-ins as well. That stretches out to 2 to 3. And then when you get to 24 hour weigh-ins, which is untested powerlifting, boxing, MMA, UFC, stuff like that, lose up to 5-7% and replenish that and have no performance loss whatsoever.
RPS, baby. Let's go.
Basic. See, you say that, but you don't take advantage of it.
No, I never take advantage of it.
Right. But no, I understand where you're coming from with that. And then the article that you were just talking about, that happened in class and was not paying attention whatsoever in strength and
Best class.
Yeah. It's talking about weight cut, not weight loss, not fat loss, not tissue loss, water and sodium manipulation. Fiber manipulation.
You said fiber
well
manipulation there? Cool.
I did.
You're just like, your Wi-Fi is like cutting in and out, but we're getting like what you're saying. So you're doing a great job right now. Is that your fucking dog?
That was not mine, mate.
All right. I think we've totally lost the man.
No?
Oh, no. Here you go.
Hey, there you are. Yeah. You're back
Good?
again. Yeah.
All right. So you got all of that. Just came in slow.
Yeah, it just came in like weird and choppy, but we got all of it. And, like you brought up a really good point, which was one, like not the loss of tissue.
Mm-hmm.
And so like lean tissue, I think is what you're saying.
Yep.
And so, what's interesting with that is after we talked, I downloaded 2 articles about like the preparation phase for bodybuilding. And I think it's important to make a distinction between the weight cuts for combat sports and strength sports and bodybuilding. Because bodybuilding, like it's you intentionally are driving yourself into like a 5% body fat, like you're just absolutely shredded. And if you if you walked onto a mat like that, you would get killed.
Right, and that's kind of my argument, is that I'm not for non-transient tissue loss.
Yeah.
In terms of performance.
Right, and I think it's just so important. Like even I just think like there's so many different factors that come into it. Like you were saying, like the fiber, the sodium concentration, the dehydration. Like it's a lot, and I think people think that the optimal way to do things is to lose just as much as you can, and then just get super fat in the off season. And just like
I'm very interested to see where that like dogmatic practice came from. Like, is that?
Like, I have no idea.
You know what I mean? That's something that just will not die.
Yeah, I have no idea, because like when we were talking about this, like I said, John Jones used to do that all the time. Like he would, he would literally go from like cut and 2:0, and 2:15 or whatever at post weigh in. Like he'd come back up to 2:15, 2:20, and then like you'd see him a month into the off season, he's like 2:45 and just like hasn't got, it's just like, that's bad. That's
Conor
really
McGregor
bad.
too, to a lesser extent. He competed at 145 and he'd be as heavy as 170.
Yeah. And like same thing with Johnny Hendricks. Like Johnny Hendricks was bad, because I think I don't remember what Hendricks competed at, but it was like, it might have been like 175 or something like that. He wasn't a small dude. I I don't remember what the weight class it was, but he was like 205 in the off season,
Okay.
just like a chunky boy,
Yeah.
like just ridiculous. And
hmm
and every time he'd do his weight cut, he'd just be like, "This is miserable. Like the world hates me." And it's like, no, you did that to yourself.
Exactly. You got no one to blame for yourself in that point, in that
Yeah.
aspect. I guess before I get to my next point, I would say, in my opinion, I kind of ranked in terms of effectiveness the methods that I just listed. I would say the most effective um, would be water and sodium manipulation. You can lose anywhere, depending on how big you are and how much water you actually hold. You can lose anywhere from 2 to 3 kilograms, so 6 pounds or so, off of just that. Fiber manipulation and spitting. Spitting only just at the very end. If you have like less than a half a kilo to lose, you can spit out that weight and be fine. And fiber manipulation is very easy to do. Just eat low fiber for 2 or 3 days. Active sweating and passive sweating I have at 3 and 4, but I think this is context dependent. If you're powerlifting, I don't think active sweating is the best way to do it. So active sweating meaning like throwing on a bunch of layers and then getting on like an Airdyne bike and sweating that out. You're going to be lifting in 2 hours or whatever. It's probably not the best to do that. But if you're in a sport where conditioning is needed and that's something that you're already used to, that's probably better than passive sweating in my opinion. And passive sweating, when I talk about passive sweating, that means like sitting in like a sauna and letting that out. The saunas are very, very if you're in there for like 30 minutes, it's hard to recover from that, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then the last I would say is glycogen manipulation, because I am not a big fan of depleting carbohydrates unless you're strictly like a ketogenic diet and you're used to it. And then again, glycogen depletion won't do anything for you. I typically try to stay away from that just because I am a big believer in performance with a moderate to high carbohydrate diet.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, just because I mean, the amount of product out there that you can use to refuel and like put sodium and like fluid back into your body is just not even funny.
Right.
And like you can load it extremely fast. It's a
I would
fluid.
say so.
Like
Yeah.
it moves through your gut like dumb fast. And like carbs, it actually needs to be like digested, move through the body, and then you need to actually be able to like store the glycogen.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
just and glycogen loading is hard to do in my opinion, just because like you have to absolutely deplete glycogen. And realistically speaking, like that training, if you're trying to deplete glycogen to lose weight, that training is going to be so fatiguing that you're gonna blow your load one day, and then the next day, like if you've successfully loaded the glycogen for the next day, great. But if you haven't, like then you're kind of screwed. And depending on what kind of training you did the day before, like you might have just screwed yourself anyways because you're just so fatigued now that you can't even like do the next day of training.
Right.
And like combine if that's your last resort for weight loss and you're already kind of there. And so at that point, like you're fatigued from the weight loss, and you're trying to figure out how to move in a body that might be, 10 pounds lighter.
Yep.
And, then you're just like, you put yourself in a hole if that's really like where you're going with glycogen. But
I absolutely agree. And I think at that point, that's when you need to reconsider what weight class you're in.
yeah,
I mean, if you need to pull out all the cards just to make your weight class, and you're not getting any better, then that's when it's time to move up a weight class, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But you brought up a good point about the rehydration replenishment. That was actually my next topic. I think out of everything that we're going to be talking about, that is probably the most crucial.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to cut the weight. It's another thing to put the weight back on. Unless you've actually done it, it's easy in theory. But if you have a 2-hour weigh-in and you cut, 2 kilograms for someone my size, so a smaller lifter, that is a ton of fluid and sodium carbohydrates, you need to get back in immediately. And it's not easy and it's not fun to do in a short period of time. And in general, I think with every cut that we're talking about, the 1 hour, 2 hour, 24 hour, the biggest things that you need to take in as soon as you get off the scale, and I'm talking as soon as you get off the scale, would be water, sodium, and carbohydrates, like preferably simple carbohydrates and not like bread and bagels and stuff like that. And in my opinion, everything else is superfluous. So protein and fat, usually want to stay away from that. If you have a 24-hour weigh-in, maybe towards the end of the day, you can get your proteins and fats in just for satiety. But it's certainly not going to aid because fat impedes digestion of carbohydrates just in terms of absorption rates and whatnot. And this, I think, is where a lot of people mess up because we talk about this a lot. And I see people who go to, I'm a powerlifter, by the way. I compete in the United States Powerlifting Federation, not in the RPS like Declan does.
Yo, it's lit though.
Yeah, it is.
I'll
admit that.
Fucking like Devil's Bar, like dude. All I'm saying, deadlift bar, God's weapon.
I'll admit that. But we talk about guys who show up to meets. All they talk about, you hear it in the back room. Oh, I cut 10 pounds. I cut 11 pounds, and all they have is a jug of water with them and some donuts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You didn't do your research, and every single time I see that, the person either A, bombs out, or B, does not perform well. And why are you even going to the meet if you don't intend on performing well? You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's something I've seen a lot. I mean, every competition, I think I've seen that. And like even handling people in meets, like it's just ridiculous sometimes because people, I mean, because like with Val, when she cut like 20 pounds to do her thing, she had a professor's help doing that and, just kind of like lost all the weight in like 3 weeks or something dumb.
Right.
And then, and then someone was like, hey, what are you going to let her, like, what are you going to have her eat after the weigh-in? I was like, dude, whatever she wants because she's dying.
True.
Like, you know what I mean? And then, right, like last year I had 2 kids for a meet and it was like way easier because then, they were like pretty much on weight. They only had to, they only had like literally I said, hey, you're not going to be as hungry during, your deload week before the meet. Don't eat as much as you normally would, like by a little bit. And they were like, yep. I was like, great. Don't cut carbs. Yep. And they were like, sick. And did that, showed up, like we're underweight by like a pound. It's like perfect. And then, we went back to my house and just had like a pretty normal meal. Like wasn't anything crazy. It was just like a decent amount of carbs, some protein, a small amount of fat. And then, I think the other thing is with like nutrition is absolutely like meet day nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more of the same stuff. Like whenever I go to meets, I pretty much will bring like rice cakes, like those chocolate rice cakes, which are delicious, and like beef jerky, and then like Gatorade and water. That's it.
Okay.
And just because like again, it's like carbs that are quick, easy, digestible, protein to keep me full through the day. Mm-hmm. And then Gatorade and water just to, like if I want to drink Gatorade, then I'll drink Gatorade. And generally, like I'm pretty anxious before, especially squats. So
Absolutely.
It's like I'm sweating.
Yeah.
Like really heavily before squats. So like before squats and then after squats, it's got to be Gatorade, and then through the rest of the day, it's pretty much just water.
Okay. Yeah, I have an example of the most recent cut I did for a meet in August. So basically, I compete with a 2-hour weigh-in. So we talked about 2 to 3% weight loss is acceptable, quote unquote, for a 2-hour weigh-in. You'll be able to replete that much. So I use a peak water calculator that I can send to you guys if you want to look into it. And basically, so I'll kind of map it out. 6 days out and 5 days out, I'll consume 60% of the peak water. So for me, that's 1.2 gallons. So it's basically, it takes your body weight into account. and then I'll load 6 to 7 grams of sodium. That's a lot of sodium.
Yeah.
It's a lot of sodium, but that's just for the water retention aspect.
Okay.
And it's very short to when you're doing this. This is obviously not, again, a health practice. This is in terms to make weight for a meet or whatnot. So that's 6 and 5 days out. 4 days out, we'll move to 80% peak water. So that'll be 1.75 gallons. And then again, 6 to 7 grams of sodium. So water retention is really high here. This is when I think people will start to freak out and be like, holy hell, I'm 5 pounds over. This is not working or whatever. Trust me, that's exactly what you want. 2 days out, I'll move to 100% peak water. That's 2.2 gallons for me. And then sodium drops to less than 1 gram. And I'll eat more energy dense foods. So foods that are not really going to fill up my gut. So this is when like a lot of vegetables and stuff like that, stuff that are really micronutrient dense and stuff like that, you need to eat a lot of them to fill you up. Those will be cut out, and I'll eat more liquids, some more protein shakes, smoothies, stuff like that. And then, so that's 2 days out. And then 1 day out is going to be the same deal, except sodium drops to below 500 milligrams. And I stop all consumption 12 to 16 hours out of the weigh-in time. And then you kind of just coast till then. So by then you are peeing 24/7. And when I mean 24/7, you're peeing a lot. It's almost incomprehensible how much you pee during that last time. You're like, when will it end? Eventually it ends. Then I'll weigh in, hopefully mid-weight. As soon as I get off the scale, it's Pedialyte. I have these things called tri-oral rehydration salts, which contain about, I believe it's 4.5 grams of sodium and 2.5 grams of potassium, with a small Gatorade. I'll have 1 gallon of water with creatine and BCAAs, pretzels, white or jasmine rice if I have it with me. If not, I'll be fine. And I think the big key here is several shots of soy sauce. If you haven't looked into that, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce is almost 1 gram of sodium. So if you just take a little swig of that with some water and wash it down, it's not enjoyable, but you'll get that sodium right back in. And then honey is a really good simple carb to get down. And by then I've never felt like I've lost anything in terms of performance. I started the week at 148 and I believed I weighed in at 143. And I was up over 150 pounds by the time squats rolled around.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone is listening to this and like, I mean, you just gave out so much shit for free that it's not even funny.
Right.
So like, that's literally how you do it.
Yeah.
And
well, these resources are out there. So This is not something that, is a secret.
But it's like, that's a good guide
right.
for strength sports at the very least.
Right. Right. I want to talk a little bit how this would apply to combat sports. In theory, I think that you can do some of these practices. I think I looked into it. You might know who he is better than I would. His name is George Lockhart. He works with like Conor McGregor, Uriah Faber, a bunch of high-level fighters and whatnot, and he handles their cuts and whatnot. Yeah, I believe his title is nutritionist. Yeah. Okay. And he uses a lot of these practices too, and he is very good with the replenishment aspect. Generally with a 24-hour weigh-in, which is what a lot of these MMA fights are, you'll see a lot of people stretch that 5 to 7% up to like 10% of body weight. Mm-hmm. And I think, then this is just my theory, this is where a lot of like like Conor McGregor, he gasses out in like round 3 a lot.
Yeah.
I think this is where a lot of those performance variables lie, especially when there's a huge weight cut, because I don't think it's possible in a 24-hour time period to replenish that much, have it all synthesized by the time the fight rolls around, and not see. I don't know how physiologically that would affect it, but that would just be my theory. Curious to see what your thoughts would be on that.
So I've referenced the study a few times, but it's a glycogen repletion study where basically they take a bunch of elite, it's pretty high level cyclists, and they just like bag the shit out of them for
Right.
for a workout, and then they just measure their glycogen levels. I really don't remember how they measure the glycogen level, but then they mentioned a study where it was shown that like in 3 to 4 days you can fully recover glycogen and you're ready to go again.
Hmm.
Or maybe it was a long time period, and they said, well, let's just go 2 days. So basically, like every other day, you're doing this protocol, and then you're going to see if you can replenish glycogen by the time the protocol rolls around again. And they found that
Yeah.
you could. So I don't know about next day, but I would assume that it's an incomplete resynthesis of glycogen stores.
Hmm.
And like it just would depend so much on what they're doing and like what substrate they're using beforehand. I would
Right.
think like the thing is that you'd have to fully like I would bet they're just using like whatever is put in their body. Like they just don't have anything else to use during like
Yeah.
the fight week. And so it's just like they really aren't using like anything besides like exogenous macros. Like
Yeah.
but that's a good point though, because people forget like glycogen is kind of a dual role. Like if you're not going like balls to the wall for like 20 to 30 seconds, then you can use it as a long-term substrate. Like it's not an immediate thing. So like it makes sense that McGregor would gas out in the third round if he's not really getting glycogen back up into his system. And like
Yeah.
and like the other, it just popped in my head right now, but like the other thing is that this is like I haven't seen this research, so I cannot confirm or deny this, but I've been told by extremely smart individual that um, fructose, I think it's fructose, is more uh, driven to actually replenish glycogen than
Wow.
glucose is or fructose is.
Really?
Yeah. So like if you so it's like really fruit is like the best way to like replenish glycogen after
Okay.
you're totally zapped out. And I think that I mean I've seen posts and shit that like just no bodybuilders eat fruit. It's just like
Yeah.
the weirdest thing. And I think that people kind of ignore fruit for like macronutrients, and they just are like, well, it's got micros in it, so here are my
You're
micros.
exactly right. Yep.
And it's just like, well, and even, I mean, vegetables have carbs in it, but like, I
Hmm.
mean, it's a very, very negotiable amount of carbs. Like you just, if someone was in ketogenesis, I would be comfortable with them eating vegetables. Is like how, just not like just such a small amount of carbs, but like fruit actually is like more likely to be stored as glycogen than anything else is,
Right.
according to Andy Triana, which
Okay.
who I trust with this, but like it's just something to bring up because that might be like kind of a hole.
Yeah.
But again, I don't really know because like one, I haven't seen the research on it, and two, like um, I mean, it's just like I don't know how fighters eat, and I don't know how RDs do their thing. So
I've definitely seen some research with that fructose thing that you brought up, and I saw, I believe Stan Efferding, he uses that a lot in his diets,
okay,
and Stan Efferding is not an RD or whatever, but he's produced some very high level lifters and
yeah,
bodybuilders, and he uses a mixture of dextrose and fructose
yeah,
immediately after intense exercise in order to replete glycogen.
yeah. It's like branch chain dextrose or something like that. There's a specific name for the dextrose, and
Hmm.
it's like I don't remember what it is, but like that is the other that also pushes more towards glycogen storage.
Right, and where he got that from was actually the guy that I cited earlier, George Lockhart. So
Okay.
that's what a lot of those USC guys use for their cuts and whatnot. Um, and you brought up incomplete synthesis of glycogen and whatnot with
Yeah,
Conor McGregor. In that podcast I was talking about with Mike Israetel, he actually suggested 36 hours would be the optimal time zone for replenishment.
more than likely, yeah.
More than likely, exactly. But the only problem is if you offered a 36-hour weigh-in, athletes would just cut like suicidal amounts of
Yeah.
weight
Yeah.
because they have 36 hours to replete it.
Yeah.
So that would never be feasible, in my opinion. But something you brought up a little bit ago was the training leading up to, because obviously we're talking about high level performance, and you want to do well in whatever event it is.
Yeah.
Usually that last week leading up to while you're cutting is like your peak week.
Mhm.
So when you're trying to peak, so looking at your training leading up to that performance or whatnot, I guess what I'm trying to say is you need to plan accordingly with your training, with your cut.
Yeah.
So if you intend on doing a bunch of, mat rolling and conditioning on the Airdyne bike and lifting and stuff like that in the middle of a cut when you're sodium depleted and drinking a ton of water, so you're excreting a ton of water, one, you're asking to cramp. Two, you probably shouldn't be doing that much volume leading up until whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
You're probably just doing maintenance level just to keep your systems going. And you kind of this kind of brings me to my last and probably ultimate point is you need to consider, are you someone who qualifies to cut weight, and are you someone who isn't? So basically what I said is people who should cut weight and are quote unquote qualified are people who find themselves overweight by minuscule amounts for their weight class. So I'm talking less than a kilogram. People who need to in order to be competitive. And this goes back to the better results at a lower weight class thing. For me personally, I could move up to the next weight class. My results would be okay, but they would not be nearly as good as they would at a lower weight class. That's why for now, I choose to stay at the lower one. Basically, who shouldn't are people who are not well educated. So we talk about the people who bring just donuts and, a monster to a meet. People who are not competitive, and this is a very tough pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of people.
That's true.
And you got to be realistic. You know what I mean? If you're not competing to A, win, B, qualify for something, or C, because you really, 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 really enjoy it, it's not necessary. It's not something that you need to do. It's not requisite. And then we're talking about being heavily overweight. So say you're 10% over. That's when I think you A, need to consider moving up weight class, or B, consider taking your cut and extending it out to 16, 12 weeks, actually dieting some of the tissue off, hopefully retaining muscle mass, and then you can get within a water cut range and manipulate that and not experience like an energy deficit leading straight into a meet. Because again, we said we're trying to peak for that competition.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, I think running a calorie deficit all the way into a competition is not conducive to performance.
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with that. And I think going off like who should cut weight, like, and who shouldn't cut weight. I think if you could have competed at like the 220 weight class for X amount of years, and then suddenly you're just like, screw it. I am gonna actually have another thing after this, but screw it. Like, I want to pull, 550 at 198. Actually, I just totally remember that this actually happened. I swear to God, this is a true story. So, this guy that Val actually interned with in Michigan.
Okay.
I hope he doesn't watch this, but he whatever. He was a 242, and I think he pulled
110 kilogram.
Six something,
Yep.
maybe a little over 620, something like that.
Yep.
And
very good pull.
That's a good pull.
Yeah.
Like at 242, that's a respectable pull. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it was on a non-deadlift bar. I want to just say that, but
even more impressive.
So it's even more impressive. And just for the listeners out there, I have pulled 600 on a non-deadlift bar. Okay, so I am a man. But anyways, so he went on like a significantly long diet, it seemed like to me, and he increased cardio, and did just like what I would consider like normal bodybuilding things to lose weight. He got down to 198, weighed in, did a deadlift only meet, and did not move 600 off the ground.
Yeah.
So like it was just stapled there.
Yep.
And so it's like that's a lot of weight to lose, you know.
Absolutely.
And
That's
I mean
my point.
that's tissue loss right there. Like so my end point here is like if you are like I'm gonna cut down to 2 weight classes below what I just competed in order to pull a PR like 600 at a PR body weight.
Yeah.
That might be kind of stupid.
It might be kind of stupid, absolutely.
Like I could see saying like, all right, I'm gonna go 1 weight class down and then try to just, maintain this strength or whatever. And and then kind of the other point that I want to make with that, I have another point after this point because I'm just like that on this podcast. But
you're on a roll, man. Keep going.
All right, thank you. So like Andy Triana, who I mentioned before, is a strongman competitor, and I believe he weighs about 198 pounds, 200, somewhere in that range. He decided to move up he decided to move up 1 or 2 weight classes to 234, I think is the heavyweight strongman class. And his reasoning there was to do an event that was like more of a static competition. So like deadlifts, like holds of like the Hercules hold, Atlas stone loads. Like there were very few like carry events, like speed events. He just wanted to get stronger and then carry that strength with him through his weight loss back down to his competition weight. So that was like a very off-season push he made, which I think is kind of a smart thing to do. He's also on drugs, so it like made the whole thing easier to both gain and lose the weight and maintain strength, muscle mass, body composition, like etc.
Glad you included that.
I just like people think that some of the things that individuals do are like godlike. It's like no, they're on drugs. I hope you know that. Like even if it's not like, hey, he's on testosterone, he's on this, like he might be on insulin. Like insulin makes your life a whole hell of a lot easier. But so I guess that was like 2 points in there too. But whatever. So like gaining a decent amount of weight and then trying to maintain the strength you have at that like higher level of weight and then coming back down might be a good choice, but you like again need to consider like, am I close to breaking a record here? Am I like a good candidate for this? Am I educated? Like, am I just going to get fat doing this, or am I going to be like actually strong?
Right.
And then just final point for me. I hope Artem says something because he's just not talked for about an hour. But is that you need to take scheduling into concern because we've talked a lot about like the UFC, Olympic trials, stuff like that at like really high level of sport. But like college wrestling, they compete every weekend.
Yeah, and sometimes at different weight classes.
Yeah, sometimes at different weight classes. Sometimes they travel for tournaments, and they like that can kind of fuck up your eating.
Yeah,
and then in high school wrestling, I mean, we competed like twice a week. It was every Wednesday and then every Saturday. Really, was like when you competed, and then some middle school tournaments go like 2 days because there's just so many kids. So it's like if you're cutting in middle school, you're stupid.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You probably kick your dad in the shin. But
I know.
like we won't go there, but like so high school, like you compete twice a week. So like I think picking weight classes really, really wisely and dieting really, really well in at least the late off season is something that people undervalue because I distinctly remember all 4 years of high school walking into the gym for the first day of wrestling practice and literally everyone being like, dude, I'm like 12 pounds over. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, or like even worse, right? Like coach walks in and is like, all right, I think you're going to be really good at 120 this year. And the kid's like 140. You know what I mean?
You'll see that absolutely, especially at the high school level.
Yeah, and like, look, we were decent in high
Yeah.
school, but it was never like we were gonna have perennial contenders for state championships. So it might be different at like a Blair Academy, which is like has been either the number one, like the 1 to 3 ranked school for wrestling in the United States in high school every single year for the past like decade.
Right.
So like it might be different at that level where they probably have the money to be like, hey, we want a strength conditioning coach, we want a nutritionist for the team, we want this, that, and the other thing. Like we had an AT, and that's it. So, which was good because some schools don't have an AT, but like,
right. I can absolutely relate to that. It was the same aspect for me.
Yeah, and I mean, this lady was like, "Don't put salt in your water, and it'll dehydrate you or something." I was like, "What the?"
Jesus Christ, man!
So it was just like, it was not good.
That's like saying, "Don't drink a Gatorade." Then.
Yeah, like
it's gonna dehydrate you.
Drinks are fine, but salt in your water with no like additives and sugar, like, dude, that's terrible for you. And yeah. So those are my points right there. Hopefully Artem has something to say.
Yeah, I'm curious to see your thoughts on this, Artem.
Honestly, I have zero experience of anything of this. So that's why I've been keeping my mouth shut and just listening to you guys. So like, I can't really say too much, but the thing is like though, like, you guys bring up some really good points. And like if I ever in the future decide to do powerlifting, which I'm probably not gonna do because I'd be awful. There's some really just good, I feel knowledge just to go in with it. Because like I said, like I had no idea like there was even this much to like go into it, because I always thought weight cuts as kind of, just not, you don't need as much, lower some intakes here and there, and just everything's gonna be all right, but like I feel there's actually, especially hearing Eric talk, there's like a specific method to it if you want to be successful in it. And I feel a lot of people don't think about that. I feel like it goes for any like topic, there's like, you just think, oh, it's going to be really easy, but there's actually a system to it if you want to be successful. And I think it's pretty neglected in not even just like weight cuts, all of things. But yeah, like personal experience, I have none, so I can't share anything, unfortunately. I'm just trying to gain pounds. I'm trying to reach your level, I'm trying to get that 230 pounds, but we'll see.
Oh, man. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yo, this kid is going to take over Renaissance periodization one day. It's going to be sick.
Yo, honestly,
yeah, right.
That would be sick though, man.
Bingo.
Well, actually, I have one question though. Like with the diet thing, like how far away from a meet would you start? Like would you start, I don't know, 8 weeks, 12 weeks? Does it vary, depending like where you are? Like say you're pretty above the weight, or kind of, just, yeah.
Is that to me or to?
Well, actually, both of you, but you can start off.
Okay. So for me personally, so my weight class is 66 kilograms. So that's 145.5 pounds. Mm-hmm. Typically throughout a competition year or just the year, I will run multiple quote unquote bulk cycles and cutting cycles. So as of now, I'm at the very end of a calorie surplus diet, so to speak. So I'll get up to anywhere between 70 kilograms and 71 kilograms. And when I know I have a competition coming, I will usually take from about 16 weeks out, I'll diet to water cut range. So that's about 149 pounds for me, give or take. So that's 68 kilograms, give or take. So I like doing it way far out from the competition and eating in maintenance for your prep. Because if you're not eating maintenance or a surplus during a prep, you're going to be giving up something somewhere. And I don't want that to be on the platform for me. And I'm very comfortable at this point with water cutting, rehydration, and all that. So I'm good with it. If it were someone else, I would recommend them to get in their weight class probably 18, 20 weeks out, just so you can just train at maintenance or even a surplus throughout the duration of your prep.
I would personally say the exact same thing. And it's kind of a pain because it differs, because some people are not let me strike that. Most people are not as serious as Eric is about their strength sport, and most will just be like, like I'll just start dieting 10 weeks out. Like they'll select a meet. I mean, some people will seriously select a meet like 8 weeks out and be like, time to shift into a strength program. You're just like, oh boy.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right.
And then right, they'll come to you as a coach and be like, hey, got a meet in 8 weeks and I want a PR on my list. You're just like, holy shit. Okay.
And I'm 12 pounds over.
Right. And they're just like, people just put themselves in the worst case scenario so much. And like most people are not at that level where they're like, okay, I'm going to select this meet and then I'm going to go diet for this meet, and then, so it's, you have to be that serious if you're going to do something like that. And, like you have to put all your chips in there. So it depends hard. But like optimally, I do think you give yourself probably 20 weeks to really diet down. If not diet down, at least start to realize like what you eat, because I think like personally that's like the most important step. If someone comes to me for nutrition advice, is like I never just say like start telling them what to eat. Like I'm always like, all right, let's start next week. Like, wait, what?
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, like we're gonna start next week. Like you're gonna, at the lowest level, I'm like, you're gonna you're gonna take a picture of what you eat every time you eat it and then send it to me. At the highest level, I'm like, you're going to weigh everything you eat this week, and then we're going to record that, and then I'm going to base your macros off of what is probably better for you than this, and then we'll start actually like modulating your macros. So it's like just trying to get the right amounts in, and then so again, like 20 weeks is probably like the best. 8 weeks is probably the average.
I'd say that's probably the average, and I would say that is the cutoff. If you're trying to diet anywhere under that, then you can just kiss performance goodbye and accept that.
But then I have a question for you. Has anyone of you tried like cutting below 8 weeks, like say you're 4 weeks out and just said, okay, I'm gonna try and do this? Like, you have personal experience from that?
Kind of. Between my first and second meet, there was only about like a 9-week turnaround. And the only reason I did it was just because a couple of my friends were doing it, and I thought it would be fun to do a meet with all my friends because they were just getting into it at that time. I would say I ran like a deficit for like 2 or 3 weeks because I didn't realize I was doing the meets. I was in like a bulking cycle, and then I quickly switched to it. And like we were talking about before, my performance at that second meet, in terms of improvement, was nowhere near from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. 3 to 4 was where I made a huge leap in my total, and that was coincidentally the time I had to plan out my training from, I believe it was actually 20 weeks out, and my dieting from 20 weeks out, and that was the best progress I ever made.
Personally, like, because I was gonna say this, but like I think a big thing about weight loss is just not freaking out. Like you just need to remain calm, because like there's measurement error, because like there is measurement error in like basically everything you can do and access to measure weight loss and fat loss, but so I like classically messed up, and I was like 230, like 235 going into sophomore year of high school, and like kind of freaked out because I was going to wrestle at 220, and like started just like not eating and like wearing sweats to bed and like all this stupid shit, and like looking back on it, I was like, dude, like you were just fat. Like you could have literally like just stopped eating so many carbs. And you could have been good, So it was just bad, and like performance suffered in everything. Like didn't wrestle well. I do distinctly remember going to the gym during this time, bench, and like right before wrestling season, hit like 225 for 3 and was like, yeah, I'm fucking strong. And then like the next week, started the weight cut. And how we did it at that gym was like, it was a very like Mike Boyle-esque cycle where it was like, you just like load first week, higher the second week, higher the third week, like just decrease reps and go up in weight. And then the fourth week was like a total deload. All you did was like
typical linear periodization type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Super linear. Like nothing to it. Like three lifts a week, like squat, bench, dead, and you just like increase load, and it worked well for the level
Absolutely.
I was at. And then, we'd go through. It was like a 5-3-1 basically. Like we'd just do phase of 5s, wave of 3s, wave of 1s, and and I remember like the 3s came around again, and I was in wrestling season, and I had like lost the weight. And I literally just was absolutely stapled by 225. Like, couldn't move it off my chest.
Which sucks.
Yeah, like, I literally couldn't get it for 1. And I was like, what just happened? And the trainer just looked at me and was like, what? What just happened? And, and now looking back, I'm like, well, I know what just happened. And you should have gotten a different trainer. But,
This is your fault.
Yeah, no, it wasn't his fault at all. But it's just like that's like performance decrements and like my stupidity, pretty much.
Yeah, and just as a quick point, that's why I'm a big fan of cycling your diets and having different points of the year. This is another Renaissance periodization concept, but taking different points of the year where you're gaining weight and when you're losing, and then also when you're maintaining. I think that if you're a natural athlete, so obviously you're not taking exogenous hormones and whatnot, that is going to be one of the only ways that you consistently can improve your performance over time. Yeah. Taking time, different times of the year to build lean body tissue, and of course fat is going to come with that. Taking the time to diet off that fat and some of that lean tissue, because that's just how natural athletes are going to work. But basically, if you can fill out a weight class with the most muscular physique that you can, with lean body tissue and the whole 9, typically that's going to be where you're going to perform best. Having excess body fat may help you leverage wise, like we were talking about at the higher weight classes, but in general, if we're talking strictly with powerlifting, muscle moves the weight, fat does not move the weight. It might give you some leverage to anchor yourself on the bar, but it's not helping you lift that weight. So if you're a 100-kilogram lifter and you've got, your 24% body fat, your performance will probably improve if you diet down to that next weight class, be more muscular for that weight class. And, assuming you're not 6'4", because,
True.
biomechanics come into play there.
All right. I think that's a good podcast right there. Good place to end.
I have one last question.
Damn it, Artem.
Dude, no, it's gonna be really quick. It's not. I don't think it's gonna take you that long to answer. I think you're gonna enjoy it actually. So like like in combat sports, they always talk about, or at least I know like in boxing, it's like this huge thing. I don't know how serious it is now, but it's like abstaining from sex, and like that's kind of supposed to fuel you and help you with your performance. No, I'm serious about this. I'm serious because things like I'm like, have you ever tried to prepare for powerlifting? And like that could be a thing. I don't know if like, because I don't swim in those oceans, so I have no idea if that's like a thing or people do. So I'm just like quick from you two, like kind of just own experience or just gossips and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Declan, you go first on this one. I want to hear what you say first.
All right.
Keep it PG for God's sakes. There might be kids watching this.
I'm trying to. Look, I'll say this. Matt Chan was.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
A very high level CrossFitter, and
I know. I've seen this video.
He was asked this question, and I do not remember exactly what he said. So I hope you can help me with this.
Yeah.
But he's asked this question before the CrossFit Games in like 2011 because he brought his wife with him.
Yep.
And someone asked him that exact question. They were like, "Do you abstain from sex?" And he says something like, "I got a lot of mojo."
Chi. He used the word chi.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
He said, I got a lot of chi. And I like to spread my chi around or something like that, right? You just like, so basically, I don't think it matters at all.
Now, okay. I will say this. Believe it or not, there is research on this, and I have looked into it. Because with boxing, this is a huge, like Muhammad Ali would abstain 6 weeks before a fight. Mike Tyson abstained for years, if you listen to him. That's probably why he was so freaking crazy, man. But anyway, yeah, spinal. The research that I saw actually concluded that it is mainly psychological, and that I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it, but essentially, you won't drop testosterone. You might even increase it.
Yeah.
So if you're worried about that, it's mostly psychological. You know what I mean? So if that's something that you're not into, then don't do it. Me personally, I'd stay away from that just because I'm so focused on that one day that if anything takes me away from that, then I know on meet day, I'm not going to be thinking about what I need to be thinking about.
So I'll say with like my psychology, like I said before, I'm a very anxious individual with competition. So like I actually perform a little bit better if I'm not thinking about competition as I like get to the competition. So if like the night before competition, I'm not thinking about competition, it's a great night.
Yeah.
Like I'm not just like sitting there like fuck. Like it's a great night.
Yeah.
You know, just like sitting there like, twitching about like worrying. But yeah, and like, you know, if someone comments and says that testosterone is going to be lowered because you're having sex the night before the competition, 1, no. 2, no. 3, no.
Yeah, show me the research that proves that.
Like, I think from like a mechanistic standpoint, 1, testosterone will increase because you feel like you have achieved like something that is reproductive, which is like a dominant trait in males. Like you're
right. We're getting back to like primal things.
Yeah, and so like you just did something that's absolutely primal, and your testosterone probably increases after sex. Like I don't think there's a perverted enough researcher out there to do a research study on this, which is why
that's what I mean. Ethics come into it. Yeah.
And you know, then I have a funny side about this. If you read Allostasis, Homeostasis, and the Cost of Physiological Adaptation, in it, there's a big chart, and it just like has this guy's blood pressure throughout the day, and it spikes at like 10 p.m. or something. And in the definition, like the little thing, like figure like 4-5 or whatever it is, it says like, you know, it's like clearly shows, you know, like changes in blood pressure throughout the day. It's not a homeostatic marker, whatever the fuck. And then it just says like spike at 10 p.m. is due to the subject having sex. Like says that word almost word for word. And it was like the funniest thing I've ever read because it's just like, it's like spikes and then just like cuts in and out and then like drops. It's like the funniest thing I've ever seen. But,
right.
And then from like another standpoint, testosterone isn't like an acute muscle strength inducer. It's like over time. Like you have to repeat it. And you have to repeat the workout over time and like over months. That's like how the testosterone changes are induced if you're natural.
Sports also don't happen in a vacuum. There is so many factors that go into performance in sports that I would think that is very minuscule in the terms of how you're going to do on meet day. Like if you're even in theoretically, if your testosterone dropped this much, is that really going to affect your performance to a substantial degree? I don't think so, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and like, you know, even thinking about it from another perspective, like maybe you should, like if you're like me, maybe you should have sex before competition because you're not thinking about competition. Then then you like dual pathway increase your testosterone because you're inhibiting cortisol. Cortisol inhibits testosterone release. So if you inhibit cortisol, then you promote testosterone release. Like, so, you know, if you're out there and just struggling to get some testosterone, there's your...
You know what to do.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Wouldn't be a podcast with Artem if he didn't bring up sex. So.
The first time I bring it on.
Dude.
Yeah, come on. Don't be a hater.
Dude, trust me, it's happened before. Don't worry about it. All right. I guess I'll outro this one because Artem's a bitch. So once again, I want to thank my father for watching, the one person who will watch this. I want to thank Eric.
Hey, I
for
watched
being
it.
Here. Oh, there you go. I want to thank Eric for being here and for being Mike Israel. And then I want to thank Artem for being the strange Swedish human being he normally is on these podcasts.
Yes.
I think Eric just got himself a few weightlifting clients in strength sports with this podcast. So why don't you tell him where to find you?
God, we're doing this.
Oh yeah.
Probably the easiest place to find me is on Instagram, Agent21EMH. That's where I post all my training stuff and my music selections.
It's legit.
It is.
Alright.
So give him a follow there, and yeah, that's all I really have. So Artem,
Thank you guys.
Stop the recording.
Thank you guys for having me.
You're not gonna do a bit more of an outro, man? That's it?
No, that's perfect.
Alright,
Stop the
okay.
recording.
Anyhow, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.